We are starting with our next session. It's we have very short time left between the sessions. And the next one is hosted by Daniel Guagnin, and he is a research associate at the Zentrum für Technik und Gesellschaft at Technische Universität Berlin, and he is talking about, well, you can see it behind me, automated profiling in law enforcement. What can we know about the actual practice in Germany? And so go on, and I think we have a very interesting session for the next half hour. Daniel said that he has maybe 20 minutes of actually the lecture, and then we have enough time to have more questions, because then we have a little, maybe a quarter of an hour to have all the questions. Okay, go on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe we also can continue the discussion we started right now, because somehow the topics are related. So, thanks for coming to the session. My name is, I was introduced, Daniel Guagnin, and the title of my presentation, Automated Profiling in Law Enforcement. Thanks again for the opportunity to present some initial findings today from our case study about the use of profiling technologies in the law enforcement sector. So, first of all, some short information about the profiling project. The project is funded by the European Union's Fundamental Rights and Justice program, and the main question is, what are the impacts on profiling on fundamental rights and values? Accordingly, the acronym profiling stands for Protecting Citizens' Rights, Fighting Illicit Profiling. So, to answer this question, we conducted a number of activities. Last year, the coordinator UNICRI made a survey to learn more about the view on profiling from the national European data protection authorities. Case studies about the use of profiling for border control in Italy and the use of profiling for commercial advertising in Romania were conducted by our partners, and we did a case study about the profiling in law enforcement, what I will present today. So, before going into further detail about our case study, I want to shortly introduce our working definition of profiling. Then I will revisit some hopes and fears about big data, which is important to keep in mind when we talk about profiling. Afterwards, I will show in which ways we produce data traces and which role they play for the construction of information. And in a way, it will be redundant to what Katharina said, so I will try to go a bit quicker about these slides, and finally I will discuss the findings we made so far in our case study. So, what is profiling? Especially in Germany, the term profiling is often used for offender profiling, which only refers to the identification of an offender to the psychological profile of a criminal. But we understand profiling as a partially automated process of analyzing personal or non-personal data, aimed at producing knowledge in the form of profiles to be used as a basis for decision-making. This is related to information science and the analysis of large databases. It is thus strongly linked with the terms data mining and knowledge discovery in databases. But what means knowledge? It's good to keep in mind that when data analysts and big data enthusiasts talk about knowledge, they usually mean correlations and probabilities. Here I put a graphic from Toon Kalders and Bart Custer's book about discrimination and privacy in the information society. These figures describe 3 different algorithms used for profiling: pattern mining using linear regression, clustering, classification. I don't want to go into detail about these techniques. I just want to highlight that when we talk about profiling, we talk about this kind of knowledge production. So, now something about big data hopes and fears. In a way, the idea of using computers and data to make the world more efficient and controllable is not new. Since the emergence of computers, there have been dreams to gain better control over the world or societies. I brought here the cover page of a 1985 issue of the journal Science for the People, which has a more critical view, but the title, Computing the Future, very well shows which dreams were in the big data analysts' heads in the past and today. The second picture is taken from an innovation study about potentials of big data from the Fraunhofer Institute for Intelligent Analysis and Information Systems. And the third picture is from the blog of the German technology fair CeBIT, which had a focus on big data this year. One can doubt what it actually means if companies are 5 times more likely to make decisions faster, or if 50% say that big data helps to better meet consumer demand, but numbers convince, and that's a big opportunity for big data. So, the other side is the fear of dehumanizing the world, or computer algorithms gaining control over humanity. On the one hand, this is expressed in a thought that humans become machines or subjected to machines, like in the picture on the left. On the other hand, people are concerned about the abuse of technologies to control people's thoughts and behavior. But where does the data come from? Basically, we can categorize 3 data sources. Sensors like cameras and microphones are not very new, but they are more and more digitized, which makes them open for ICT processing and computer analytics. Moreover, we have logs or technical data traces, while sensors are intended to collect data. Logs are technical information at the first place, but can be used to gain knowledge about interactions and behavior. For instance, logs about telephone calls, mobile phones, or are intended to organize the telephone system, but can be used as information about locations and social relations between individuals. User-generated content is the benefit of replacing one-directional broadcast media like television and radio through network media, where any individual consuming content can give feedback and share information about different information channels. This actually turns individuals into data sources. So you saw some of the pictures, maybe. What does these traces mean in practice for the people who just came into the room and didn't see the presentation before? I just want to say the left picture is a visualization of social connections reviewed by a person's Gmail account. It's a tool from the MIT, or a project there. On the right we see information which can be drawn from your mobile phone connections. Your mobile registers to cell towers, which reveals your location, enriched with the information about ingoing and outgoing calls and the content, for example, of your Twitter account. That's a lot that can be known about you. This displays your interests, your social contacts, and even your recent whereabouts. So far, we revisited what kind of data is generated by us and our daily interactions, and what it means to analyze this information to gain something often called knowledge. Now I want to present some findings of our case study to show which role profiling plays in the law enforcement sector in the field of political activism. First of all, I need to say that I'm presenting work in progress, so the analysis is still going on, but we have some findings which we think are worth to share. Accordingly, your feedback is appreciated after the presentation. Our idea was that when we are talking about profiling, data processing and data protection, the most relevant fear is the impact on the exertion of fundamental rights. That's why we chose to focus on political activism, because the freedom of expression and political participation are core values of democracy. This field of research is very sensitive because the debate about the issues is often very emotional and the experiences are quite subjective. However, we address these problems by taking into account various perspectives. We did qualitative interviews with police experts, lawyers, scholars, technology producers, and political activists. A little spoiler to get started: fully automated profiling, as introduced in the definition, is not used in the police sector we had a look at, but it seems that automation plays an increasing role. Nevertheless, we find some interesting hints about the changing processes of reasoning and the construction of suspicion. Our focus is thus more on the changing practices and the role of technology and humans, less on an exhaustive enumeration of police databases. Let me start with the police perspective. From the police perspective, it's important that large amounts of data become accessible through the digitization of data. Especially complex relations and structures can be made visible when information is stored in databases, and links and relations between objects, places, events, organizations and individuals can be visualized, and thus missing links can be found. This is much easier than with paper folders. Police practitioners feel a necessity to adapt their tools and capabilities to the increasing relevance of globally networked crime, which justifies the need to exchange information between different departments and different authority levels, which is much more efficient once information is stored digitally. But the interchangeability of data is limited by law, and the linkability of databases is at the moment forbidden. Both limitations are based on the principle of purpose binding, but there are discussions ongoing to loosen these restrictions. Remarkably, assessing the data is of increased relevance. Validity of data needs to be thoroughly assessed. Where does it come from? What does it mean? Also, police staff is specially trained for this task. This leads to high documentation requirements. It's not only important which data is available, but also how it was generated and if it has been stored correctly. So it seems that the transition from traditional folders to digital databases is still in progress. Some interviewees reported a burden of additional documentation, others reported difficulties with documentation processes. Another aspect is that validity of digital information needs to be made comprehensible in court by a human, what can be sometimes difficult if between the investigation and the trial is a long period of time. So we see the new demands of assessing, validating and documenting information shows that the new technologies used by the police have raised uncertainties regarding the qualities of data and the ways how to handle it. Finally, it was repeatedly stressed by police interviewees that there is no data collected or stored without legitimate grounds. That means events which justify an initial suspicion. Moreover, it was stressed that there is in general no interest in doing more of investigation or analysis than necessary, and also not enough resources in regard of woman power. From the lawyer's perspective, the legitimate grounds for data storage and processing are sometimes vague and arbitrary. Notably, it was also reported that legal frameworks for new methods of data collection and investigations are sometimes unclear, but nevertheless evidence is generated and used during trials. They also stated that sometimes the police documentation of the sources of their knowledge is incomplete, which makes it difficult for them to comprehend the investigation processes and the construction of suspicion. As a result, lawyers feel a knowledge asymmetry in favor of the police. As an example, it seems that it has become a common practice to do GSM location queries. What we saw this picture from Malte Spitz with localization of mobile phones. And the practice of these location queries goes wide beyond the legal scope of using it only in very severe cases. So also here's a kind of uncertainty perceived, but in this perspective it is linked to the opacity of data processing activities. So let's come to the citizen perspective. Opaque is also which information is stored by the police about individuals, and it can be very difficult to get those kinds of information. If there is an entry in a police database, and which data is stored and for how long. But of course, if you're behaving, it is very likely that there is nothing stored in the first place. But this uncertainty, where the boundary is between behaving normal and behaving suspicious, was described by activists. It was reported that activists withdraw from being politically active and from cooperating with civil rights groups, which are considered to be potentially under scrutiny. Thus, people refrain from exerting their fundamental rights due to the uncertainty what information could be collected about them and how this could be used against them. This, in a way, reminds of the book The Trial from Franz Kafka, which very well describes how it might be not to know what information is processed about a person and which part of it is considered as suspicious. This picture from the film version from 1993 shows the scene where Joseph K. visits the courtroom on a free day. It very well illustrates the subject under suspicion which has no idea what is the core of the trial. What do they know? What is conceived as wrong behavior? Joseph here just sees that there is a trial going on, but at the moment he cannot see anything or get any information about what is going on there. It might be individual cases where people strongly experience unjustified surveillance and control, but it is important to keep in mind these cases when talking about new regulations and technologies like profiling. As a summary, the role of humans in data processing has become increasingly to document and assess and validate information. The reasoning changes. Weight of information changes depending on which information can be retrieved from data accessible. The grounds for data collection become blurry. Social networks become more relevant in the field of our case study. Reasoning is inscribed in data analysis tools. This also leads to new forms of suspiciousness. The amounts of data and new ways of analysis lead to uncertainty, the need of validation and documentation. Uncertainty is also on the side of citizens and lawyers because they experience difficulties in reconstructing the line of argumentation due to the opacity of data processing and information construction. That's from my side. Thanks for listening, and I'm very curious for the discussion. And if you want further information, you can visit our project page. There are also working papers, and there will also be some working papers in the future in the next month when we finish our case studies and have the final reports. Thank you.
Are there any questions? This one?
Yeah, hi. Maltes Spitz, my name. I just wanted to know if you can say something about the necessity, which types of data are actually more important for profiling. Is it just like the metadata from telecommunication and internet usage, or is it more the validated data from insurance companies, from your PNR data from flight and travel companies and so on? Like, what is the most important type of data for profiling? Or just like to make it more concrete, is it more necessary to have the vast amount of data, or is it more about the quality of the data?
That's a good question. Thank you. I have to say we don't have too much information from the police experts what really is the most important data, because it also depends on the cases, and I would say it really strongly depends from case to case which information is gathered. But on the other hand, when we come to the field of political activism, what we have reported also from lawyers and political activists, this GSM location is a very effective tool, because you can easily check which persons have been on several places, for instance. So I would say, and that's a very important source, but yeah, we don't have hard facts about this. Sorry.
Hi, thank you for bringing this topic. I'm wondering, what's your experience with the know the algorithm debate, so to say? Because we are all aware that it would be much easier if we knew the logic behind profiling, and of course there is always security argument that they cannot say. But I believe that if we keep it black or white, we will always lose. So we have to try to find some middle ground where certain aspects of this logic have to be revealed, because there should be borders of legitimacy. I mean, not every sort of profiling will be legitimate. For example, clearly discriminatory or taking into account sensitive data, even for the police, shouldn't really be allowed, right? So do you have any ideas how to juggle this, or how to find a middle ground between knowing nothing and demanding everything, which we will never get, probably?
I would say, in general, we have we can get some information. What are the main ideas, or what are the practices? For instance, if we talk to police experts, they tell us that there are economic crimes is a very important field, and organized crime, and that they try to find those links. And on the other hand, political activism is a stronger focus than other things around. So I would say at the moment it's quite focused on several fields, and there's no general suspicion. So, but on the other hand, at the same time, we cannot really say where's the border. And I think when you say it's not black or white, that's right. But interesting are the blurry parts, and it's hard to find out where's the border between being suspicious and non-suspicious. Here's a question. Here, first line, second line, here. Yeah, it's coming.
The lawyer's perspective on this is always that the regulations are too unclear. But if you have a changing technological context, I don't know how you make clear, exact regulations for every context. What came out? I mean, what would you suggest in that regard? How do you come up with regulations that are clear but flexible enough to move with a changing context?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think the problem is that the gray areas are tolerated maybe too much. Maybe it would be a good idea to more restrict these gray areas. For instance, when we take the GSM locations queries, this study about the use in Berlin from the DPA, when it's public that they really use it in a routinized mode, or in a routinized way. I wonder why there's not more debate, or maybe there should follow consequences, stronger visible consequences, that now it's less used, so that the law can catch up in a way. So we have to, in a way, throttle down the practice and speed up the law, maybe. More questions? In the meantime, I just want to say we had the discussion about what can we do against surveillance in the web, and I'm not too much into it, but there are really innovative programmers trying to develop solutions to fix the web. There was the conference, You Broke the Web. I just want to mention it. You can check it out and see projects going on. They try to make new tools which make it possible to have a social web without servers or without tracing functions. So it's always important to keep in mind that we have to regulate things, because not everyone can just become a techie. But on the other hand, we also can think of alternatives to all these big solutions. So just maybe if someone wants to catch up the discussion from before, because it's in a way the same problem.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we have finished the session, and maybe we can just say thank you, Daniel.
Thanks for listening and for the discussion, and yeah, have fun in the Republika.